All right. Let me turn on Infinite Azure and talk. Darth Sajam. I'm in the dark today. What's up? So today's topic is an interesting one. Today I want to talk about analytical commentary in fighting games. We don't really have that many analytical commentators in general in the community, right? There's very few of us. But I think what's cool about our analytical commentators is that they're so different. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of our commentators that do analysis are extremely different in what they focus on, what they're good at. The kinds of things they'll talk about in a match is different. Like, what I would talk about in a match as an analytical commentator, or the way I would describe a situation, is different from this analyst, is different from that analyst, is different from that analyst, etc. Right? Which is a really cool part about our community's commentary. I think when I think about fighting game commentary, the things that we succeed at the most is we have so many good hype commentators, right? We have so many good, exciting, entertaining hype men. In particular, like, we have guys like Yipes, who can deliver like super entertaining play-by-play and has excellent references. So he's really funny to listen to. And then you have guys like Steve, who are just really excitable, and they make every moment like really interesting to listen to, just because he's just got so much energy that you never know where it's going to explode into, right? You're just like constantly entertained by listening to him. And we have a lot of guys like those two, right, where they're really, really entertaining and they make commentary fun to listen to. And I think the number of hype guys we have compared to the number of analysts is super skewed in hype favor, right? If you think about like the number overall that we have. Eris as a classification, I don't think I would consider Eris high. I think he's like in the middle of hyper analysis, but Eris is kind of his own entity because he's not really like a normal commentator at all, right? Generally, Eris is, when you're commentating with him, you're commentating like as a background guest in the Eris show. You know what I mean? Eris really is his own kind of a commentator. He kind of just does what he does, whether someone is there or not. You know what I mean? That's what's interesting about him as a commentator. But about the analysts in fighting games, I was thinking the other day about who are the real analysts and what their strengths and weaknesses are and what makes them unique. Because when I think about analytical commentary, I try to learn from other people, right? I try to learn from all of the other analysts in our community. And so one of the examples I used a while ago was Obama, where Obama had these really interesting intros where he would do Mikado, right? If you haven't seen the Mikado League, it was a exhibitional style league that they had in Japan, right? For Guilty Gear. And he would do these intros where he would like deliver this super interesting sermon where he would talk about the players, where they're from, what characters they play, the kind of like character or player they are, and they'd give you a lot of lore about the player, right? Background information. He had all the stats, and it was really interesting. So when I was thinking about analytical commentators, I try to classify Obama's analytical commentary, and I realized after working with him at Seam, yeah, he's the SBO Togeki, Ugeki, Migeki, world champion 1984 Olympics. He got the gold medal in shuriken throwing. Like, he knows all of the, the background about people, right? He's always good about bringing up that kind of stuff. So I was trying to classify him as an analyst, and I worked with him at Seam recently, and I was thinking about our commentary there and his style of commentary and like the style of analyst he did. And what I realized when I was thinking about Obama is that he's really not an analyst, actually. When I think about Obama, he's like, his hype and his prepared phrases for play-by-play are S tier, right? And what I mean by prepared phrases for play-by-play is, all of the interesting, funny, like, lines that he has ready for when stuff happens, right? Throwing big mini Faust and calling it Momo-kun, calling like throw, grab him by the collar, Richard Lewis, the all those kinds of jokes that he has prepared, right? Those are obviously really funny in his play-by-play, and they're very him. Yeah, calling Kid Buu Drake's son, like, stuff like that, right? He just got all this stuff prepared about his play-by-play. But when I thought about his analysis, I realized that Obama is really like a semi-analysis. You know how you call Nikali like a semi-grappler, a half-grappler? I think about Obama as like a semi-analysis, where he doesn't really deliver like the same kind of analysis that a dedicated analyst would. Instead, it's more like Obama is like the perfect example of a hype commentator who has prepared enough knowledge and background about players that when the game is getting ready or when the game is like at a point where he has time to talk, he has delivered lines and delivered background information that he can give you about the players, about the community, about the gravity of the situation, right? So he's really like the lore master, like many people say, but in that sense, right? He's like a semi-analyst. His analysis is not about the game usually. His analysis is about the lore of the situation, about the gravity of the situation, the background of the situation, where the players come from, right? He's really good at explaining that kind of stuff as an analyst. And I think that that's his big strength, but it's not like a traditional analyst, right? It's more of like what you'd expect the entertaining person to have kind of locked into their brain, right? That's kind of what I think about Obama. So then I was like, well, who are the analysts, right? I had to get past Obama. I was like, well, he's a half analyst. He's like a semi-analyst. Who are the real grapplers, right? If he's a half grappler, who are the full grapplers of the game, right? And my first example was his co-commentator, generally for Guilty Gear events, Ryan Hunter, right? Ryan Hunter is like the dedicated analyst, right? He is like the analyst. And what I like about Ryan is that he digs deep into the game, right? He's like the scientist of the game. He understands every unique situation. He labs really hard. It helps that he's still a player who's obviously plays at a very high level, so he can dig into the game very deeply. And so because of that, Ryan Hunter is like that kind of an analyst, right? He's the analyst where he gets to dig into the game and he has really deliberate delivery about how he sets it up to you, right? And he has his speaking voice and the way he presents comes off as so knowledgeable that you automatically, A, believe everything he says and trust that he's correct, and B, he makes you want to listen to him, right? Just because he sounds like everything he says sounds so interesting, right? Everything he says, the way he presents it, his tone is very fun to listen to, right? He's like, he's a good teacher. And so because of that, that's why him and Obama work so well together, right? Obama is not the real analyst in that duo, obviously, but he does the important part of the analysis that Ryan won't do as much, right? Ryan is going to focus on generally the match and the situations in the game and the battle between the characters and the matchup and like little situations that happen, while Obama will be the one who, although he doesn't have that side as much as Ryan, he can still do it, obviously, but he doesn't have that level. What he'll do instead is focus on the gravity of the situation, where these players are from, their backgrounds. Obviously, he lives in Japan and he speaks Japanese, so he can delve into the backgrounds and the history of Japanese players better than like Western players can. So that's what his value is as the analyst in that duo, which is why their commentary is so informational together and it's so fun to listen to, right? So I was thinking about those two as analysts. That was the first duo that I thought about and why they're so fun to listen to. And I think that that's like, it's a classic pair, right? That's a really kind of standard cutout for a commentary duo in most things, right? Is you have like the hype guy who is, doing the big moments and he has information about everything else that he has there. And then you have the guy that's going to deliver the analysis, right? Then I thought about other analytical commentators, and kind of similarly to Ryan, there's obviously Donka from the US. He doesn't do as much commentary as everybody else, but he is extremely knowledgeable, and he is one of those guys that is a good example to look at if you are a newer commentator, because I think he fits into the mold of many people who are interested in commentary but are just starting out. And I think he's a good example of someone who is extremely knowledgeable about the game, obviously still a player, so he can deliver, like, when he speaks, he has like that kind of respect to someone as a fellow player, so obviously he knows what he's speaking about. The only issue that he has is that he's very new to commentary, right? He's very green. So unlike someone like Ryan Hunter, who has extremely experienced and delivery, and is someone that is like really, really useful in those kind of situations. Instead, you have someone who's like Donka, who has all the knowledge, but doesn't know when he should say each thing exactly. And he can explain every situation to you beautifully, or perfectly, but not beautifully. You know what I mean? Like, he knows exactly what happened, why the game mechanics function in that way, but not how to explain it in like the way Ryan would, or the way someone who's more experienced, right? He's just a newer commentator, because he's still a player mostly, but he's excellent, and with more practice would be one of the best analysts in fighting games, right? Yeah, that we made so much fun of him at Evo for the what's it called? Using ABC in Dragon Ball. We couldn't help ourselves, man. It just cracks me up. He called 2H 2C. Oh man, that was pretty good. So that was another example, and I wanted to pair him after Ryan because I think he's similar to Ryan, except for just less experienced as a commentator, although excellent. I'm a big fan of his. Yeah, a lot of people bring up Tyrant. Tyrant is great at doing analytical commentary as well, right? And he also has that ability to speak from the perspective of the player, right? I think that that's a very useful thing to have as a commentator. That kind of like strength really is unique. You can't fake that, right? It's hard to trust someone who is not, you haven't seen them play before, you don't know is a good player. The next person that I was going to bring up is Seth Killian. He's probably one of the most like popular fighting game commentators who doesn't do it anymore. And he's one of the first analysts and the first commentator that I ever heard doing fighting games, right? So I've thought a lot about his commentary. And what's interesting about Seth is like he does a style of analysis that nobody else can copy and nobody else can do the same way, right? That's what's interesting about him. And so a lot of my commentary is structured or influenced by his style of commentary, but I realized very early that what I like and know about fighting games is not the same as what he likes and knows about fighting games and the world in general, because he thinks about the player, right? He is the analyst who talks about the psychology of fighting games, right? Because that's what he is, right? He was a professor and he knows about people extremely well. So what's interesting about Seth is compared to other commentators, he has that ability to understand the psyche of the player better than anybody else and explain what they're feeling in the situation, why this moment, the gravity of this situation is so big, why he is able to kind of like make those moments so interesting and so relatable. I feel like he does an excellent job at doing two things, right? One is making a player feel relatable, making you feel what they feel in that situation. And as somebody who's played fighting games before, you're like, I understand what this guy's feeling. I understand where this guy's coming from. And Seth does an excellent job at doing that. And the other thing he does is making someone feel way godlike, right? Like just a godly being who's above you, who you can't even begin to feel like the same way as them because you just know that this person is the best. When he describes people like any of the Japanese gods of fighting games or anybody who is just on that another level, like the way he describes them is so, beyond like understanding or beyond appreciation or almost as like a normal competitor. But he manages to do both, right? He manages to make you feel for them and also make you feel like you're just so below them also at the same time, which is an interesting thing that a person can do, right? And I think that's a lot due to his background, right? His understanding of like psychology, his understanding of people. And that's something that you can't copy or you can't take unless you have a similar background to him. And also, just his speaking voice and experience in the community is like, almost unparalleled in terms of how much practice he has as a commentator, right? Which is something that's really interesting about him. A lot of you guys have brought up other people as I'm going down my list of what I wrote down to talk about. A lot of you guys are bringing up other people. I talked about Steve earlier. Steve is actually a secret hidden boss of analysis. We make a lot of fun of Steve for not knowing what the fuck he's talking about sometimes, just making fun of him as a person, but he actually has excellent analysis. But he only uses it when he has to. And when he delivers analysis, he has something that's like very unique to Steve when he does it that makes you listen to him. Like when Steve delivers analysis, first of all, it's extremely relatable analysis because Steve is not very fancy about how he delivers it. He just gives it to you. He just tells you what's happening and he tells you what the player's doing to adjust or what you need to listen to when he adjusts. But when Steve delivers analysis, Steve will be talking to you. He'll be like, yeah, that match was really sick. I enjoyed it. Oh man, that was crazy. And then he'll change into like his analysis mode. Right? This is when you'll notice it about Steve. This is what makes his analysis so fun to listen to. He'll be like, that match was so sick, blah, blah, blah. But then you notice, like, the thing that happened, he, like, kind of lowers and he drops into, like, this different level that he's speaking at. And it makes you listen to him and, like, appreciate the analysis that he's dropping on you, right? So even though people don't think about Steve for analysis, he has that voice and that delivery that changes the way you're listening to his commentary. You go from like, wow, that was really exciting, I'm into it with Steve, and then he dips, and then you dip. You're just like, oh shit, where did we just go? Why did we just disappear down below this like sewer, right? We're like, what the fuck just happened down here? We're sneaking around, and he's like giving you it's like you see an enemy in the distance in a game, and you're sneaking, and Steve's like, so the thing about this enemy is,
he's weak to sneak attacks. So you got to pull out your bow and hit him from far away. Like, he gives you the analysis, but it's like you're hiding from your opponent, right? It's like he doesn't want the players to hear him almost. That's when he does it. He dips down. He brings you down with him, which is what's always fun to listen to, right? And that's a very Steve thing. He does that like differently than anybody. Even if what he said made no sense, the analysis he's giving you works, and you believe it because of the way he sells it, right? He's an excellent salesman. And that's what's fun to listen to about Steve, right? He wasn't on my list, but I thought I'd bring him up because somebody mentioned Steve as a commentator. Right. That's what you get when you're thinking about Steve. And I also get the Twitch Prime. Thanks very much, Garlic Bear, for hitting me with the Twitch Prime. But yeah, he wasn't on my list. Sorry. I just thought I would talk about him briefly. He's someone that's easy to talk about. Justin is somebody that somebody brought up as well. Justin has the ethos of a player as well. I brought this up, but of anybody else that I've brought up who has it, he has the highest tier, right? Where Justin is still someone who competes at the highest level. So when he gets on commentary and speaks, people believe everything he says. And it's obviously founded in reality, right? Everything he says, you trust. And when he makes reads about players, he's almost always right. And he is really good about telling where the match will go and what players are looking out for in every match, just because he's such an experienced player, right? That's why Justin is a great example. Top players who are very knowledgeable, if you pair them with someone who's experienced in commentary, the duo almost always works well, because you can have someone who's like me, who's just doing the play-by-play, who's getting excited, and then leans on the other person to be like, hey man, what's happening here? And then that's when Justin's just like, oh yeah, here's what happens here, and then blah, 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 right? He just goes on and just talks about whatever the situation is, right? That's where you can lean on Justin. Vi can do the same kind of thing. Yeah, Vi is a good example of someone who can do that as well. Other players or community figures who have been around a long time, who have been top players or still are top players, those are people who can do that well. Anyway, we'll get past people who aren't on my list and talk a little bit about my analysis, right? We got to talk a little bit about me, mostly because obviously of all the people we've mentioned here, I obviously think about my commentary the most because it's my commentary. Because I think about our analysts a lot. A lot of you guys are like, oh, thinking about yourself. Yeah, who do you think about 90% of your day, okay? Yeah, when it comes to analysts, it's interesting because I think about analytical commentary a lot and what I can take from it. And I mentioned earlier I thought a lot about Obama's because there was stuff that I took from his commentary. But I realized kind of in the middle of commentating with him, actually, is when I realized that he was a semi-analyst, right? That was what was interesting to me about the... you guys in the chat cracked me up. That was interesting to me about the realization I sort of had about his commentary style and his strengths and weaknesses as a commentator. And for me, I think I'm very similar to Ryan Hunter in the sense that I'm an analyst who focuses on the game. Right. When I talk about fighting games, when I focus on fighting games, I like focusing on the game and what's happening in the match, the interactions between the players, the interactions in the game, what people are looking for on both sides. And the one thing that I try to always be good at as an analyst, and it took me a long time to build this, I talked about this a lot on my video when I listened to Smash commentary and I was trying to get influence from that. There was one skill that I wanted to focus on in particular, and it got brought up on Twitter the other day, which is what made me think about this topic, which was making the analysis digestible and keeping the analysis really compact. And my goal was to be able to take analysis from play-by-play, watching a match and seeing what's happening in person. And instead of having to see something, do play-by-play of, oh, he did this, the reason he did this is this and this and that, and having to piece it together. My goal was to become digestible in the sense that I can see something happen, and as I'm doing play-by-play, turn that play-by-play mixed into analysis. So you don't waste a lot of time going back and catching up on analysis later. That was one of the big goals that I had, and in trying to make my analysis digestible. And because of that, I think there are times where other analysts will dig deeper. They'll take longer and get into the meat of a scenario. And if you have the delivery, the deliberate style of someone like Ryan Hunter, you can totally do that, right? If you have the player background where people will listen to what you say and know that is it is founded in the strength of how good you are as a player, like Justin, then you can get away with something like that. But for me, I wanted to keep it as digestible as possible because one of the most important things about fighting game community is the hype man. I brought that up in the very beginning. And you want to give as much space to them to be as entertaining and funny and energetic as they can. You know what I mean? That's one thing about it. Yeah, that's sort of what I'm getting at, right? Is that when I commentate, I want it to be very relatable and understandable, and I want you to be able to pick it up, right? And I think Ryan is someone who gives you the truth of the situation, right? And he is so good at that. And also Ryan has some of the best analogies. He's got really, really good analogies, and he's really good at delivering like the importance of a situation, right? When I always think about Ryan, I always love the commentary he did when the Washige moment happened, because what he said was Washige thought it was over and Ogawa gave him no remorse. And I always thought that was such a good line. You know what I mean? I always thought he did a great job in that particular moment. But he does a good job of, like, the way he speaks is so deliberate, and it's really, really good. This is going to be a long YouTube video. It's fine. People always tell me they want more YouTube content anyway. Hello, YouTube. It's good to see you again. So that's what I like about it. That's what I like about Ryan's in particular. I had a list of all the analysts I wanted to cover, and you guys added a bunch of people. So, you know. Ogawa definitely destroyed him in that moment. Oh, it was pure destruction. It was such a beautiful moment. We're talking about Ryan Hunter, if you guys don't know. I like Ryan Hunter's stream, too. He's great. Magic Moss says, long videos with the Sajam what face? I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that. Anyway, that's just what I was thinking about when I was talking about analytical commentary the other day. And I got brought up because Tafo, you guys might know him, Smash commentator, was talking about how there's a lot of commentators who try and do analytical commentary because they know people like it, but then deliver a commentary that is like, you say stuff, but it doesn't mean anything. You know what I mean? You say things and there's no value behind it. It's devoid of real, like, depth. It's kind of just very surface level analysis. And, you know, I think that can be definitely an issue people struggle with. I'll talk about that in the next video. The next video is sticking true to your strength as a commentator, and how sometimes you just have to know when you and Seth Killian are doing Evo Japan commentary in 2018, neither of you are going to be like, oh yeah, like the hype dudes. You have to understand that a top 8 like me and Seth, two heavy analysts, are going to be a lot more mellow and a lot more like, you know, about the players, about the game, about the psychology of the situation, which is something obviously I knew and people knew, and people seem to like it. So anyway, that's it for this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I'm going to go grab a light because it's really dark in here. And when I come back, I'm going to play some games. Give me 1 second.